Let's start. Hello, good morning all. This is the morning Tertulia number 255. Today is July 18th, 2021. My name is Nilse Oliveira. I am here bringing to share with you my research, which is stages of the conscientiometry approach. I would like to reinforce that this tertulia, this debate, is going to be translated in Spanish and English, arriving to all of you, all the information. This is an free event to the Parascientific Conscienciological Week, which happens since 2014. We are launching the 8th edition, and from the last editions to this one, we have usually works related with this Parascientific Week. So in this year, we are here. So I wish a great debate to you all. I will be giving a briefly presentation, and then as soon as we are done with this presentation, please write it down, your doubts, your questions, and as soon as we are done, you can go ahead and place in the chat with instructor Luimara that is helping all of us today. I have a nice team, a strong, nice team related with that, that they are great in this subject, and they will be a great team to be debating with us. We have a team of specialists that comes from conscienciometry. We have instructor Elmar and other instructors, and Luimar as well, which is, she's a veteran in this area. And today we have a great pleasure, and she will be helping us with the mediation. And we have also a nice team that have been organizing, also Alexandre Zaslavsky, that coordinates the Interscientific Council, coordinating the council. We have here Ana Seno, who is also very active. We have Mariane Jacó, Lauisa Barbosa as well. So to reinforce, this has been helping a lot, all of us, and they have been helping all of us, and even have been helping me in this work here. And we have also instructors from Conscius here, a nice team. I want to embrace everybody and say thank you very much to the nice team. So I want to show how scientific is Conscientiometric and Conscientiology. So I will be talking about the conscientiometric approach that we all conscientiometric instructors are related with. And the intention of this work is to show what we have, what is the connection between science. So we are not just thinking or putting things together. This is part of a process, part of important process, and a part of my experience working as a conscientiometry teacher. So thank you all. I think it's interesting to reinforce that. So I will be sharing my screen, and we will be talking about the main ideas. And then I want to reinforce that you please go ahead and send your contributions and your questions. So the title is the stages of the conscientiometry approach. I will be start talking about why I was motivated to talk about this. As I said before, I wanted to be writing about the relationship between conscientiology and science. So select this subject. First of all, because I wanted to show the interaction of conscientiometry thematics with the theme of the event. So I consider one of the main specialities that connects conscientiology in a general manner. And this theme, and this year in the Parascientific Week, we will be talking about the interaction and the interdisciplinary relationship. So we want to be talking about the day by day, about our work in the day by day using or connecting conscientiometry inside of what I have been already learning and the conceptual basis. And I want also to talk about the markers and the differentials of conscienciometrology. What is the difference between conscienciometrology and other specialties from conscienciology? So we will be starting with this. So the specialty, which is conscienciometrology, aims to analyze the level of holomaturity of the polyadrical consciousness. You can go ahead and look in the projectology book and the page 36. You will see a table in which we present the basic specialties from conscientiology that was organized in 1999. This table, this sheet connecting all the specialties. And we used to talk much longer before, even in the 700 experience book, treatise. So this specialty is connected, strictly connected with holomaturity, holomaturology. And it aims to analyze, to evaluate the consciousness using the holosoma and using the conscientiological attributes in order to measure the level of holomaturity, which is analyzing the proposition of maturity of all the consciousness. So we want to analyze how I am, how we find ourselves, where we find ourselves in terms of the whole universe. So we are not talking here about healing, or we are not reinforcing here the weak traits. So we are analyzing the traits, all the traits that we have as consciousness in order to see if we are more mature, less mature, in order to be aware of the intraconsciential reality and bringing benefits in which we can feel, we can see ourselves in a more integrated way and be connecting with our self-reality. bringing a certain level of homeostatic, a very positive homeostatic level. So even the weak traits, even the difficulties that we have, even conscientiometry not being connected and aiming to solve those problems, it ends being positive and it ends helping also us to solve the difficulties and the weak traits that we have. But it's important to reinforce that we work here with a disbelief principle. We used to say that we aim for the homeostasis due to conscientiometry. So, and therefore, we use, in order to practice conscientiometry, we use techniques, resources, and specific instruments. And the basic one is the book Conscientiogram. I want to show this important book here. This is a book with 2,000 questions, and they aim to evaluate the consciousness in a holosomatic way and in a multi-millennium way, in a more approached area, and analyzing the conscienciological, based in a conscienciological paradigm. So the origin was the first ideas, they came long before the conscientiogram, back in 1996, in 1994, and the 700 treatise, in the 700 experiments of Conscienciology. So the first course is from Conscienciology. So the 700 experiments is the treatise that presents Conscienciology to all of us. And Projectology was the treatise that presented Projectology, which was launched in 1986. But on the other hand, Instructor Vieira used to say that he brought first the 700 experiments in order to prepare all of us to receive Conscientiogram book. So people that they were studying Conscienciology, and they would be able to understand better using or analyzing or studying the 700 experiments before. So what we see is that the base of Conscientiology is Conscientiometrology, which is the study of the consciousness. When he brings the 700 experiments showing tests for all of us to be able to work with that, that was the first hints, the first ideas about conscientiometrology. So this is the thesis that I am bringing here right now, in order for us to be debating about this. No, we have even here Alexandre Zaslavsky as our debater as well. And then this shows a multidimensional approach in a more integral, a more complete approach as essence of conscientiology. And I am bringing right now a verbete from Instructor Vieira. And the verbete, Basis of Conscientiology, Base da Conscienciologia, in English, Basis of Conscienciology, he shows those ideas. in the area of, you can find this, you can read this inside the verbatim, inside the entry of the encyclopedia. So now I will be talking about the meanings, the self-diagnosis. The self-diagnosis measures the conscientiometry, measures conscientiology. So this is very important. We should look, we should analyze, we should understand the self-diagnosis. We are going to discuss later on. So then we will be talking about the synthesis of the analysis, about conscientiometry process. So the baseline, with a baseline and with a scale for location. So, and then we have, we use as a baseline the Homo sapiens serenissimus. And then we compare the different types of consciousness, no? Since the consciousness who were reborn until the Homo sapiens serenissimus. So, and then we analyze the parameters, the quality, and the difference between us and the Homo sapiens serenissimus. So what is important is to analyze the cases from the self-manifestation. No? With those analyses, we end up having results. So we start our analysis basing on the case series of self-manifestation. So we are going to talk about, whenever we are going to talk about conscientiometry, we need to associate a series of cases. And we need to analyze, we need to see the exposition of the consciousness in order to proceed to analyze the conscientiometry. And then now I have the definition, the conscientiometric approach. This definition was proposed in an entry on 2018, and it was reviewed by a group of people. The conscientiometry approach is the set of technical procedures by which the conscientiometrists prove, auscultates, reasons, interprets, and ponders on the consciential reality under analysis, aiming to assist the measurement by the very motivated conscience, considering reinforcing strong traits, the self-strong traits and the weak traits to overcome the self-weak traits, and lacking traits to develop self-weak traits in favor of the self-evolutionary holosomatic homeostasis. So we aim to analyze what we need to change. We need to qualify it in our intra-consciential reality. So what is lacking? What we need to adjust? What we need to regulate in order to accelerate our development? looking for the holosomatic homeostasis. And then here we are going to talk about the methodological basis. So the self-questioning, whenever we talk about this, we talk about tests for self-assessment. So those are the tests for the consciousness to evaluate themselves. Actually, what we do is we help the consciousness to arrive by themselves in their own conclusion. So we can even perceive the manifestation, subtle ideas or subtle information about the manifestation of the consciousness. But if he or she, if they don't identify, we end up not perceiving what is important to change. So this is important to reinforce that. So it's important to provoke the self-questioning in order to help the consciousness to understand and to see what is more important and what is down deep in the intraconscienciality structure, intraconscienciality reality. So there is a limit in that. We always consider this limit. We consider criticality, detail is in a important, in a exhaustive approach. The more we go, the deep down we go, the deep down we analyze the consciousness, we will be able to analyze down deep the root of the consciousness. So the main goal of conscientiometry is not being in the surface. So let's say the person communicates in very well. Okay, so this is a person who communicates well, then it's a communicology. No, this is the first level. We need to go down deep. When we use conscientiometric analysis, we need to go in a more vertical analysis. What she or he had done with the intraconscienciality, in the intraconscienciality that generates as an effect the strong trait of communicology. So what they develop, what is important to analyze. So this is the analysis that is in the back of that idea. So that's why we talked about the parascientific rationality, which is an entry from also instructor Vieira that I encourage you all, if you want to understand more this process of conscientiometry. Sometimes people might even get confused. They get confused between the parascientific rationality and the conscientiometric approach. So inside the process, I crossed the definition. You see that we use a few action verbs like listen, reason, interpret, measure, discriminate. So those verbs are part of the process when we talk about the conscientiometry approach. Also the path of scientific practice. So this is related with the scientific process. We we do a data collection with the team specification. We practice the problematization, hypothesis, elaboration, analysis, measurement, and new finding. So this is a basic movement that are part of the development of the science in a more general approach. And this movement has a correlationship with our with analysis, analyzing the reality of the consciousness. So this is the correlationship between all these areas and between all these scientific approach. And then why is relevance? No? So the abordagem conscienciométrica, which is the conscienciometric approach, when it is adequated, applied, it aims the interassistential clarification task in order to promote the self-discernment, the consciential self-discernment. And I consider that with that, we can reach in a more effective clarification task. And this is connected with my proaxis as well. This is what I consider important and very fundamental. And this is what I think is important. And I open this for the debate. So instructor Nilse, thank you very much for helping us as conscienciometra and bringing all the experience. We are here with a colleagues, with a few colleagues. We have a question that is related to the first item, which is how I can qualify my para-perceptions from the multidimensional field. Should I do profound questioning to amplify the perception and the para contact with the team? Can you talk more about this? Can you elaborate on that? Yes, I am talking about the exercise, about this interaction. I aim the practice of conscientiometry. I want to be doing the conscientiometry from the person. So in this approach, in this analysis, you contact the consciousness that is there looking to use the parapsychism in order to be able to analyze all the details that are present in that field. So I will be listening the narrative of the person, which is what the consciousness is bringing and is showing in here or in her manifestation or his manifestation, all the ways the ways they show many times, and sometimes we even analyze the non-verbal things that we can see, things that are around the person. And then I try to develop a para-perception about the consciousness. So not only this, so at the moment in which this consciousness is manifesting himself or herself, is she or he manifesting with a few, do they have a few interference from the extra-physical consciousness? Do they have other connections with the intraphysical and with environment as well? So what are the other connections that are part of that situation? So we need to remember that nobody is ready. No, we need to analyze the entire situation, because if you don't look for this level of um, non-superficial approach, we need to go deep, because sometimes what we can see, the trait that we need to see that is there down deep, that might not be the one that we can see. I can even bring one example. When we are analyzing a person who is presenting himself or herself as a shy person. So let's suppose this person can present himself due to many reasons. So there are a few studies that show these situations. And then we might consider, we might see, oh, perhaps he or she, they come from a specific culture. Perhaps this person is showing this individual is presenting himself or presenting herself in a more shine way because of specific situations, due to specific situations. So, or perhaps we should think like, is the person like this because this individual is actually like what they are showing, or what we can analyze, what we can perceive in terms of that manifestation. And that might that might even depend, or that might even be connected with the environment in which the person was raised or was growing up. Perhaps the individual or the person is feeling a few interference from other people, from the group around, from others around. So what we need to consider, what is important to consider, is analyzing all the variables that are connected with the situation.
So your presentation has a lot of interesting insights. And I was thinking about the item number 4, about the interpretations, about this conscientiometry, and sometimes in other situations, the person can project his or her own interpretation or personal context on the other person. Could you talk a little bit more about it? About the contents? How does the conscientiometrist can avoid this mixture between the selves there? It's a constant exercise. The instructor Caroline also knows this. What is important relative to your question? We need to exercise ourselves in terms of receiving feedbacks in order to understand yourself, do your homework, your self conscientiometry, so you can differ your ego between the other person. This is very important. But can you totally exclude that? Uh, that's impossible to do it 100%, but you need to be attentive. You must have acuity, and it's fundamental. It's very common that you're going to show the other, and this is your intraconsciential reality. So, or you know the person. For instance, the reason of my shy, that I am shy, is the same as your reason. But hold on, let's see. How is that? And sometimes we want to deny something, your own, our own traits, and you reflect that on the other person. So the important thing is that you know yourself better and question why is that? Especially if we are used to make the same approach all the time for everybody. So be attentive to this behavior and make this exercise of self-conscientiometry. But not there, not at that moment that you're interacting and doing the hither conscientiometric, because the focus is on the other person. But outside that set, create a habit to do your self-conscientiometry in order to decrease these influences. Hi, Nilse. Good morning. Congratulations. I loved your research. I think it helps a lot the scientific process, this approach that you're proposing is directly connected to scientific methodology, how you deal with some team and develop this team. And this is very important inside a scientific scope. So you're bringing a contribution that we can apply on other specialties as well. And I'm curious to know, how is the mindset of a conscientiometrist? Because you've been studying that for a long time, this conscientiometry study. So, how did you arrive to this proposal, these stages? Did you use more theoretical elements of conscientiology, or you've based on your self-research as well to think about the stages? Could you explain that? I started to think about these stages when I started to invest, and I always liked in conscientiology the self-research. I started volunteering. What brought me to conscientiology was the self-research theme. And I started with the self-organization to Penta, and this process to seek to understand myself. I always have this trait. The first time that I read Conscientiogram, the book, I really didn't understand that. And when I saw that scale, you need to grade 0 or 1, I was very uncomfortable. And when I faced some question, I said, oh, I cannot tell that I'm 100% or 0% in a general way. So this aspect I already have. And so I saw it was important. When I didn't live in Foz do Iguaçu, I didn't have the opportunity to apply to Conscientiometric courses. And when I moved to Foz do Iguaçu, my first priority was to start the courses at Conscius in order to understand that better, to deepen my self-research, to improve my self-research. So I found, so during this path of the conscientiometric path, which is a couple of courses at Conscius, I realized that I wanted to be an instructor of that because those courses helped me a lot. And I thought, without this conscientiometry, the self-research is very superficial. It is possible to make self-research without the practice of conscientiometrology, but uh, I see that it's important to apply conscientiometry in order to deepen the self-research. So back to your question, how did I reach this stage? Well, I started observing and recognizing that I want to be a volunteer at Contus. I want to be a conscientiometrist. I'm going to leave another volunteer job at Encyclosapis, which I like a lot, which is writing verbats. Because this writing verbats, I do it well. I perform in a good way. So I need to do something that challenges me, that I'm not so good at. And I was looking at to some colleagues, for instance, I remember Luimara, and I questioned myself, how does she do it? So I started working, observing how other people did that, probe other people. And then I was there. And then the next step, I was there on the field in the set, and I have my self evaluation as well. Oh, I could be better at this, I could do that better. Okay, we have a question here about the parameter. What is the criteria in order to measure that the detailism is already good or still superficial? So the detailism helps you to get there, and it's important to be attentive to details. And it's important for the conscientiometrists to be attentive to that. But what is the limit? How can we perceive that you spot the core? For me, it's very difficult. I don't reach the core. I go as far as possible. And the consciousness is going to show this limit. While the person is assimilating what you're saying, so the process is going on. You deepen the approach. The time that you reaches a barrier, oh, hold on, this is new. I didn't perceive that. And then you realize that you achieve the point that touches the person, and I see, okay, we reached the point. And if you want to press it forward, maybe it does not make any other sense. So you reach the point, the deepest point that you've been reached. And on the other hand, you should not stop on the surface to repeating things that the person already knows. Um, and avoid talking about something that is related to yourself. For instance, well, your trait is that you're a shy person. Okay, I've heard it a lot. I know, but tell me more, tell me more. And then the conscientiometrics deepen, deepen. But when you reach that point that bothers the person, stop. Despite you know that you have more aspects, but you've already reached a deepened level that shows the manifestation of the person. So you stop, and then the person will have the opportunity to deal with that situation. What is the psychological approach that is related to conscientiometrology? Oh, that's not my field, but that's, of course, we study a lot psychology, despite it's not my area. But among all the things that I know and read about psychology, is the cognitive component, behavioral psychology, uh, that lets the person understand the relation between the traits and the person manifestations. Oh, the understand of tocenity inside Conscienciometrology, and weak traits and strong traits. Psychology doesn't go that far, but the psychology understand the cognition. So this is the similarity. And previously you were talking about limits. Uh, when it's deep enough, should we go further or should we stop? This is very interesting because the deepening should be didactic. The person should understand the process. Otherwise, you don't intrude. You just throw information, and there is no constructions, there is no self research. And if you deepen too much, just throw information without constructing uh, the cognition or letting the person construct a cognition and understanding about the situation, you can go further in a negative way. Could you talk about it? Yes, it could even harm the person. If you're losing the effect of the essential, it could be harming. Yes. Well, first of all, congratulations to the presentation. It's very technical and precise, which is your very peculiar characteristics, your characteristic. What, what caught my attention in this approach is the self-cognition. How do you, while acting as a conscienciometrist, how do you happen help constructing the cognition, because we may influence the other person when we're helping the person uh, constructs the thoughts, and you can influence or induce the person to think like you. So here is the question: how do you perceive this work that you're helping the person to reach the self cognition by her or his own? What are the elements that the conscientiometrists use? Well, the resource that I think, and one of the resources that I think it's important, is to make questions so that the person is going to think about it. It is not that we're going to give a path, but if you were in this condition, and if it was something like this or something like that. So, according to the answers that the person is giving, you you go for further. But most of the time, or sometimes, it also does not work. So we try to use other resources. And this is why I agree with Luimara, because you need to listen. So you start listening the person to figure out the best way of dealing with these questions, because there is a point that sometimes the person cannot even answer. There's a blank, and the people becomes fragile, and there is the problem, because the person is going to accept everything that you're saying. So there is a moment that it seems that, oh, everything that the person is telling me is okay. So when the conscientiometrist perceive that this is happening, so you stop, because you cross the cosmoethic limit, and you may be influencing or harming or leading to a non-positive belief. So stop, let's think about it. Sometimes I even deconstruct what I said. Oh, no, what I said, it's not like this. When I perceive that I am influencing the person, I just gave an opposite point of view, and the person starts agreeing with the opposite as well. So sometimes it happens. So it's better if we stop, uh, take a step back in order to verify what's going on. And you reach the diagnosis, so you stop. It's a very important moment, the approach, which is the previous step. And I'm remembering that polynomial, welcoming, clarifying, orienting, and following up. So, in order to reach this objective, I see something that you've already said that's very important, which is the parapsychism. During the welcoming, the parapsychism is relevant. Just like you said, the auric coupling helps because you're energetically reading the person, and you're getting more information than what the person is saying. And then you can have insights to make questions that lead the person to reflection. And the person just start thinking about things or aspects that he or she is not aware of it. So this initial welcoming is very important in order to build trust, intertrust. Yes, I think this parapsychism and energetic reading is fundamental. So it is very important for us to develop our parapsychic signals to perceive the field, to perceive contexts, which context is coming in, which are going out, what are the evocations. So what the consciousness is talking at that moment brings all this process. But it is a balanced parapsychism, like an intellectual parapsychism. This is important because parapsychism can lead to a lot of mistakes. You can perceive something that is from the context and interpret that it is the consent. And you can interpret actually the idea of blind guides, of intruders, or maybe there are some insights of helpers that you're not really understanding. So we need to consider that all. And now we need to make an inner check to perceive if you're going with the flow and stop and question. Okay, hold on. Is it right what I'm perceiving? Is it? No, no. Let's stop. It's not relative to the person. And you can ask, oh, yourself, am I being influenced by contexts? But this is very delicate. We have the parapsychic process, but it's not the center of everything. So we are responsible. We are the acting people. So I cannot just throw and say everything that I am perceiving, everything in the energetic field. And please don't say that, oh, I'm seeing a context here, I'm perceiving the extra physical. For me, this is a very primary approach. That is not a good way because you can be influenced by contexts. And this is actually an argument of power, a parapsychic argument of power, that you're going to empower yourself in the situation and you place yourself like the big guy. And this is not helpful for the other person. This is not conscientiometry, because conscientiometry is to increase lucidity and the cognition of the other person. What I see and perceive relative to helpers and contexts is more like insights. Give this hint, follow this way. Oh, this idea has more energy. Let's develop this idea. It's more like this. And the person does not need to know that you used a parapsychic resource there. That's not the important thing. I've already received feedbacks that I know that the conscientiometrist used parapsychism because the words that the person said, it's very similar to a helper that I know. So I perceived that. And I questioned, why? Why was that necessary? And that was okay, that was true. So it is very important. And in parallel, we need to develop our parapsychic signal. And if you have doubts, just say nothing. It's better. Before Louisa, in this flow, in this context of investigation, because we're perceiving here that the conscientiometrist instructor helps to highlight the self research. We have a question here that is, how the question is important as a research method. And so there are two questions here, and the second one. So the first one, what is the importance of the question as a research method? Fundamental, because it is through questions that we get the elements to help the consciousness to understand itself, because sometimes the person asks with new information that he or she didn't even know, but there is something hidden in the memory. And from this point on, that you elaborate everything. So the question is fundamental. And the question over other question. And but how? The person brought an answer. And depending on that, you apply another question, and then you go elaborating that. So we have conscientiometric tests because the whole conscientiometry is based on that questions. Take a look at the book Conscientiogram. So it are questions that you should stop, reflect, and answer. And when you think, I'm going to reflect about that, is the way that you is when that you were seeking information, and then from this point you go.
So what I want to reinforce that the methodology that is presented here, it doesn't come from zero. Initially, the person gets predisposed to the conscientiometric analysis. So first of all, the person reflects before, either by herself or himself, or even the person had been answering a few tests, and the person had been reaching to a self condition, and the person had been amplifying his or her doubts. And then in this moment, the conscientiometry arrives and helps the person to understand better this her or his situation. So the person had already been fulfilled, been filled, fill in the blanks in a spreadsheet. And from that, we have an entire process of answering and analysis there. So there, the other question here is if the elaboration of the self-questioning will be giving one idea about the breathing, about the oxygen of the intraphysical conscience, of the conscience. So the reflection, the capacity, the capability of getting in contact with himself or herself shows, indicates the path that, or the parapath that we can reach, or perhaps coming back, picking another way to direct the situation. So this is part of the process. Okay. Okay, Nilse, congratulations. It's an excellent work and instigates us to be focused in this parascientific week, interconnecting the specialties, the conscientiology, so on and so forth. Of course, I will be placing a question related with Penta. So we used to talk a lot about the conscienciometry and Penta, and I would like you to help me to understand, of course, and whenever we are starting Penta, we analyze the day, the interaction with people, And then when we go and practice Penta, we are assisting this entire situation, or we are even analyzing or perceiving as a Penta practitioner a few flaws that we have. So in this stage, I see a kind of window, a kind of paratherapeutic window for therefore the helpers. They would be able to help us to understand conscientiometry, in a more conscientiometry approach. So considering those stages, those conscientiometric stages, and what's the relationship between those stages and the penta? Well, I don't know if I were able to understand everything you placed before, but I see a straight correlation between the process of penta, of practicing penta, in which you are predisposed, in which you are wide open to practice your penta. Of course, whenever we are practicing penta, we couple and we are available. We are wide open to what may come. And we connect ourselves with our sanity in a more lucid way. And at the same time, we have the answer of the helpers who are coordinating the entire process. So what I see is that we don't know what we are going to find whenever we are starting to practice our daily penta. So we listened, we analyzed, we go a bit more. But actually, in whenever we are practicing penta, we don't cross those stages as specific as we crossed in conscienciometry. What we do is we are relaxed, we are there waiting for the guide of the helpers. So those are the subtle things that I see. So I remember that you told me that conscientiometry will be helping us to become the helpers, the future helper of um, the practice of penta of any individuals. And then whenever you mention Matt, that I recall that in my penta, and the first 10 minutes, depending of the assistance that we are doing, sometimes I stay there thinking in one issue and understanding, trying to understand a specific process that had happened with me in the days before. So that's why I established the connection between your presentation and Penta. Well, it is for sure the helpers from the Penta, they must understand quite a bit well from conscientiometry and even the evolutiologists, because they develop this acuity to perceive the, the specific moments and the acuity to guide better our penta. But thinking in the process of now thinking again in the process of the helpers from the lens of the helpers, of course, the helpers, they need to be specialized in conscientiometry, because the helpers that are guiding our penta, they need to see what are the consciousness that they will be bringing to be assisted. So in And then the helpers, they need to be aware, they should be aware of his or her intraconsciential situation, intraconsciential reality, in order to be able to bring a group of consciousness to be assisted. And inside the pentaform from we all. Nevertheless, there are situations in which we should be quiet in a specific moments. And the best we should do is to establish a very assistential approach. So until where what is the limit we had talked before? It is not the limit from the person who is assisting, or it is also the limit from everybody who is involved in the penta. So if I have no condition, if I'm not aware of this situation, I will not be able to fulfill the requests. So that's why this exercise is important to be, so we can establish rapport with all different groups. So Nilse, I would like to pose a question here in the first page. Whenever you talked about the unity of the measurement of the conscientiometry. So my question is, should we be focused only in the self-diagnose, or we should cross other steps? Well, I think this is a natural movement coming from the self-diagnosis. And then the consciousness will be looking for what he or she can do to qualify that weak trade or that situation in which he is perceiving, in which he is aware or she is aware of the situation. No. So what we used to do, what we used to encourage is, okay, you discover that, and then what? What you should do from now on? And then if the person reached or stopped in a moment in which for he or for she it's difficult to overcome that specific situation, this is an important point. So we need to be aware about our limits. We need to be aware about our level of hollow maturity. But nevertheless, there are few contexts, a few moments, in a few situations in which you see yourself, you focus yourself, and you watched your own reality. And then if you start to analyze that, you perceive that you need to change. And then you stop in a specific moment in which it's hard for you, it's difficult for you, and you cannot overcome that. Overcoming for you that situation, it is too hard. Then if you reach that situation, you should look for other professionals, other people, other groups to help you to overcome this specific weak trait, this specific situation. And then it's also important to see where people locate themselves. If you locate well yourself, if you feel well with yourself inside conscientiometry, you go ahead and you overcome this difficult inside conscientiometry, conscientiology. So we need to see what comes better for us, which group is better for us, and where we place ourselves better. So Nilse, congratulations for your work. I think it was quite rich, instigating. Myself, I have many ideas. Your work, I think it represents a syntax, an effort to synthesize the speciality. You, as a conscientiometry and a conscienciometrologist, can summarize your experience. I would like you to ask about the perspective of developing the speciality. Whenever you systematize, whenever you displace the bases and the stages, how do you see the perspective in the future, from the future on, where you can perceive where this speciality should be developed? Another way of formulating the question is, what would be the goals from conscientiometry, and what is the what are the expectations that you have? Well, I see this is an important question. I think we are exactly in a moment in which we need to think about the basis of conscientiometry. We will need a lot the help of specialist people, but analyzing the basic paraepistemology, for example, the paraepistemology from conscientiometrology. Well, it is there. We have lots of practice. I know you are going to talk a bit about this, about the methodology of what is behind. I know you are going to talk about in the Parascientific Week. We have symposiums from conscientiometry as well. Instructor Carol is coordinating there. And then I am counting a lot with your contribution in the Parascientific Week, because you are going to talk about a methodology that will be supporting this practice that we are bringing here. In order to understand and to talk about the science. So I will be letting in we all in the curiosity. Okay, but I would like you to listen to you about this from those stages, that you proposed. What are the stages that need more research? What are the stages? Pick one stage and tell me what is more important. Which one is the most important for us to develop more research? I think the systematization, we don't have any specific thing related with that. But I see that perhaps the capacity of hearing better, auscultating better, I think it's the step by step, because we are going to develop our methodology from the steps that we learn whenever we listen others, whenever we can hear others. I think being able to hear well others, it's very important. It's quite fundamental, because this is exactly when and where and how we are going to interpret the manifestation. But to be honest, I don't think there is one or two stages that needs to be developed a bit more. So I think it's quite logic if you start from the beginning. You might constitute a methodology of research for the team, for the people who are studying conscientiometrology. This is what interesting on about developing the specialities. So the specialists they might establish concepts. They might establish what is in common. So as you did. So if we place our lens on top of it, we might think about how this hearing, this conscientiometry hearing works. So this is the entire develop of the speciality. So I think your contribution is quite important to be able to structure the speciality. Thank you, Nilse. So this is a suggestion as I see things happening inside conscientiometry. How is the process of disconnecting the cable? So the consciousness that is crossing the conscientiometry process. There is the process of the cognition happening. So the consciousness can understand himself or herself, can understand the entire process and how this process reverberate in his or her context. It is quite complex to research that, but I think it's really rich. So it is the moment of stopping. I think it's quite important. I don't see how you would be focused in yourself only in one stage. Therefore, we are not talking about separate stages, step by step. No, we present as a crescendo, but this is all the time goes and comes back, go and come back. We have many techniques and many tools to develop that inside conscientiometry. So one interesting question, a project that I see for us to start is doing this analysis. So us doing this analysis using the technique books from Conscienciology and Conscienciometry, perhaps creating new tools with for new approach. I think then we have a very pragmatic issue. We go there, we create, we established new ideas. This is what we have been doing, especially in our courses. You know, letting this technique, letting this research, letting these techniques. So in this sense, we have a question about this. So instructor Nilse, congratulations about your presentation. So how should we think about the virtual courses? Could those techniques used without any problem, or we should develop other specific techniques? So folks need to know, folks wants to know, well, what we perceive is that we can apply conscientiometry, yes, on the virtual courses, even using the tools that we have in the moment. Of course, yeah, it's not the same as the same interaction as whenever you are present, but the energy exists. The energy is there. It is as intense as we need. So the energy is there, and it is what it could be. And then we have this process. We talked about the stages. So in the moment of hearing or mapping or analyzing what is present in that moment. Of course, I am not in that specific environment. But then we will see how far we can go in order to consider the consciousness that is behind the line, in the other side of the line. There are a series of other considerations, of new considerations that we need to analysis. And of course, we are counting with all of you. What I see is in a sense of being able to contribute in the process of elaboration of this self-cognitive elaboration. What we want to do is helping others to arrive as much as they can do, they can go.
And it's nice, né? Because this is a topic that we've been discussing a lot. We're being very careful with this situation. What are the elaborations, approaches, how far we go? And this is very specific for each case. And the conclusion that reaches this: the people that are away, that the only possible way to do is this virtual clarity task, but we need to consider the context. I think what you've explained reminds me a consideration. We're not applying the consensual Guinea pig because it's a recommendation from Unicin, but the main change is that the person has the elements for the self-research through the online course, and the person is going to present, to share his or her self-research, and the approach of the conscientiometrists goes as we are re-verifying the person's finding. So I think that this approach is more effective. So the person reflected, have the traits, and we have this possibility among the participants. We choose who we're going to present. And then we just check with the student how this construction was, where are the elements that we perceive that there are coherence gaps. So essentially the conscientiometrists are re-verifying, and it helps to amplify the elements that the person utilized to build that reasoning, and also the blind gaps, the blind spots. And for sure, we change a little bit the perspective and the approach, but the balance, the result in terms of increasing self reflection and cognition, I think it's the similar result. Well, in fact, there is this that you're saying, the process, the states of conscientiometry, it is still valid. But the question is, when you're in person, there is also the re-verifying thing, because that's the consciousness, the student that's going to elaborate that. And okay, maybe when we are in person, presential, we can deepen the approach a little bit. But this is relative because the situation depends on the consciential openness of the person. And I had a case, an example, that you stuck on the surface because the consciousness in conditions to deepen the process. But sometimes we don't do energetic work during virtual courses. And this is a recommendation. And until we mature this situation, there are a lot of aspects and criteria involved relative to working with energies. And, and sometimes it may happen during a presentation. Oh, it's not that common to happen, but sometimes we need to say, okay, let's stop here in the middle of the presentation. Let's make an energetic work here and stop. So it depends on the nature of the activity as well. For instance, the guinea pig, the person is going to read the conscientiogram, will grade him or herself, and everything is interexistential. Uh, so we need to take care of some things. But if you're doing a preceptory, that the person is bringing some more deep and delicate aspects, it is kind of hard. But we also need to pay attention to not cross a line and starting conscienciotherapy. So we have the means and the aspects to make the right approach relative to our role. And the virtual courses, we can apply these things as well. But how many students are there? 20, 30, 10? What are the experience level of this person? Is this the first course of these students, or they're just following a program? So these aspects we also consider when applying the states that I brought. I'd like to say something about the proposal and how is the application, or how do you apply it. So you apply these stages of approach thinking about a dialogue between two or more people, right? Yes or not. Or can you apply it by yourself, these probing stages? Oh, good question. We talked a lot about the interaction with the conscientiometrist, but remember, the conscientiometry is self-conscientiometry. So the person can use and apply all these stages. This is like a self-use. So I've considered, you can take a look uh, at the reference, the specific bibliography. And when you're talking about self-evaluation, there are some examples there that they're talking about self-evaluation. And these works here, these reports, helped me a lot. So we have this process of self-research, and the authors show in their works, for instance, the author Loimara that talks about cosmoethics and conscientiometry. There is another research that is from a group of people. Let me see here. I'm just checking here. I'm opening. It's from Carlos Spranger, which is the author. It is a work of research from 2001 that shows his personal experience. It's just to illustrate that it's a self-evaluation. Okay, another question. Those stages have a timing to happen. Uh, it occurs like a minute ago, one stage after the other, or the period is longer. So you're probing, then you wait a lot, and then you're listening. Actually, it's everything all in once. It may happen. In a moment, you reach a point, but that situation just reverberates. So you need to do what Leumara said to re-verify. And then you take one step further. And now I make the correlation with the scientific process. Okay, so I reached this point. But hold on. It leads me to new research. And then you just deepen the process. But you have landmarks. And these landmarks are important, which are the eureka points. Oh, I reached here. As far as understood, the apex is the interpretation, right? Because the first, when you enter the recycling per se, there is another cycle. Is that so? What is the limit between the cycle of conscientiometry and this limit between the cycle of conscientiometry and the self-confronting? From the moment that you clearly perceived that I now identified, and from this point on, it's not only interpretation, but you need to ponder on the context, on the interpretation, because it's not only discover. So you need to measure, but how is it? I say about all the measurement possibilities. So how is it? Is it very bad, sort of good, regular? So try to translate it in a grade. So from this point on that you're measuring, the person has an element. And when you reach this point, something that may occur, it's the positive euphoria of the homeostasis. Wow, I discovered, despite it's a weak trait, it's a difficult thing, but it's clear. And from this point, the last stage, it's discriminating, this self-diagnosis, and it's almost natural that you're going to reach the next step. And then that's the end of the conscientiometric cycle. But it may begin because my approach is to keep researching, or the person stops there and simply orient or guide in order to work with that discovery. For instance, I need a therapeutic process. Could be through conscientiotherapy or to energetic, through energetic works, more potent energetic works, so you can uh, try to reach a CP. Or the person identifies, uh, okay, that I should invest in writing. So the diagnosis shows some paths, and that's the end. Nilse, we're, we're almost coming to the end. Well, the conscientiogram is a tool that measures my subjectivity. How can I evaluate the effectiveness of the conscientiogram in order to evaluate the consciousness? Well, I used to say that conscientiogram has this goal to measure, and this is good because it helps us to position ourselves. But this book helps a lot with the self reflection. And not only this neurotic approach, oh, am I grading right or wrong? So we talked about this a lot in the course, uh, Conscientiogram Without Drama. So try to reason about the question, how am I relative to this question? Think about your case studies, your experiences, not only the last experience that you remember, but all the experiences. And based on that, the conscientiogram helps us to understand yourself better. And it was very well elaborated. And the more we study the conscientiogram, we perceive that nothing there is just to be. There's a very logical pattern among the questions organization. There is one in one page, and then it's linked to another on the other page. So it was elaborated very carefully. When you start reading conscientiogram, you start perceiving these nuances, and it helps a lot in self-cognition and the understanding or the reasoning about what is to be a consciousness, because there are a lot of questions and variables that pops out that you have never heard about it. You don't know what that is about. But there are some consciousness that experiences that. So this is a part of the consciential manifestation. Sometimes it's more positive, sometimes it's less positive. Because we have the grade for Kant's house, we're no longer Kant's house, but maybe you can have some traits or remains of this immaturity. So the more you deepen the study of conscientiogram, the more you're accurate in your grades. For instance, is this an attitude of a deperto? So yeah, so it's close to 5. So if not, so my grade is a little bit higher or lower. Sometimes we have students that has a graph, a level, evolutionary level on the scale that is clearly not the person, we and the person. know that that's not quite precise, but it's important. Structureism, we're really coming to the end. This is a very interesting theme. Unfortunately, not all the questions were able to be answered. There were some that there are some questions that are very specific and basic relative to conscientiometry, and we say to these people to look for conscious. Your final considerations. Well, I thank you a lot for the opportunity to be here to share these ideas with you, and let's keep on. So I invite everyone that are interested in the scientificity in conscientiology and conscientiometry. So come together in this process. I'm here with my arms open to all that want to know more. You can get in contact with us. I'm at Conscious. Look at the website. Uh, get in touch with Conscious, and you can look at for me. Okay, I'll answer all the questions. Thank you, Instructor Nilse, a very experienced conscientiometrist. Thank you for your lecture and the technicity of your work. We thank everybody here, the colleagues, conscientiometrists, and the participants of the Paris Scientific Week. We also thank the helpers with our technicians in conscientiometry. So we have 700, almost 700 access, and we hope to see you next week. Good Sunday for everyone.